The issue with biofuels, or what indigenous peoples prefer to have referred to as agrofuels, because bio means life. Agrofuels, which is a pretty scary issue. Here you have the big time agricultural companies of the world, the Cargills, Monsantos, who are now shifting their focus to become players in the global energy markets, and they're doing this by transferring their market focus from food production to energy production through biofuels. Now, whether that's sugarcane, switchgrass, palm oil, or corn, ethanol, it's all bad. I mean, locally controlled and produced biodiesel is a totally different thing. Small-scale biodiesel is a great thing, okay? Totally sustainable, it's awesome. However, large-scale agro-industrial fuel production is devastating on biological diversity in the region that it's being produced in, both due to destruction of land, the overallocation of water to produce these crops, because many of these places don't have a lot of water where they're producing biofuels. And they're heavily intensive in terms of their water use, as well as the impacts from the pesticide use and the genetically modified organisms that they use to grow. Because for biofuels, they can use genetically modified corn, they can use genetically modified palm oil, palm trees that grow faster, that are less susceptible to insects and disease, but that wreak havoc on the local circle of life, and that are not safe for human or animal consumption because they're genetically modified, and nobody knows exactly what the long-term impacts of eating those products will be. And we've already had all kinds of cases where food markets have been contaminated by genetically modified rice and corn, and so we already know that these companies can't control where their product ends up. And I think even more scary, the more scary reality of agrofuels is the chaos and violence that'll ensue from the food shortages, because corn producers in Mesoamerica and in North America are getting way more money from ethanol producers to sell their corn to ethanol producers than they do to sell them into the food production, okay, into the food systems that feed our societies. And so the implications of land, of productive, fertile agricultural land being used to produce fuel so that some middle-class American family driving in their Hummy or SUV can go drive to the beach and chill out is crazy. I mean, the idea that we're going to take limited agricultural land on Mother Earth at a time when we have so many people to feed, at a time when there is such a need, to really move towards, efficiency, and that we're going to use that same land to produce gasoline so that we can continue to perpetuate and buy time for this auto-centered transit, is absolutely backwards and makes absolutely no sense in the context of the climate crisis. And it's got scary implications on particularly the poor here in the industrialized North, and of course our brothers and sisters in the South. In terms of food shortage, in terms of displacement from lands, all across Brazil and in other places around the world, indigenous peoples are being displaced from their traditional hunting grounds, their traditional farmlands, so that rich, greedy corporate landowners can grow biofuels. And of course, a lot of these people that are displaced end up in the cities, end up in factories, and many of them end up dead. And so, there are a lot of really scary implications to the emerging agrofuels industry, on biological diversity, on human rights of not only indigenous peoples, but other, campesinos and land-based peoples around the world that rely on our Mother Earth to feed their families. You know, and what we're seeing happening now is just an ongoing delay represented by the agri-fuels market to the true solutions that need to be implemented to address the climate crisis.
The UN, some UN agencies are saying the indigenous peoples don't really have an understanding to deal with the reality, and that the reality is there is just this major overconsumption, and that there is just no way around, and they are not really as quick to be implemented solutions, and that you do need all these things, and that you just have to somehow do the best out of it. That's somehow the comment, that basically it's not about the companies doing it, but basically the population who wants it.
Well, I think that there's no doubt that the consumer dictates, you know, everything in this capitalist economic structure that we unfortunately are living in at this time. However, one thing that I've always understood about social movements is that they come from the grassroots, and it's always the leadership, whether it's, you know, the mayor, the governor of the state, or the president of that country, or the UN itself. Social movements come from the people. And so, of course, when we live in an economic paradigm where the bottom line is profit, you know, the political will is going to be very weak to have any radical shift away from what's putting more money in the rich's pockets and continuing to keep those that have been bearing the water, drawing the water, and carrying the wood for the rich to keep them down. You know, and I think that this discussion around climate justice is really about that. It's really about redistribution of wealth and sharing of resources in a way that is equitable. You know, and I think that, you know, it's not surprising to me, I guess is what I'm saying, that there isn't the political will within the United Nations to implement some of these hardcore solutions that we're talking about. And that's why a lot of these interventions need to continue in organizations like the United Nations, because someday they will catch up. But the reality of it is they have to be attached through an accountable mechanism to the indigenous nations and the grassroots organizations themselves that are doing the on-the-ground work. Because, I mean, think, you know, can I swear on here? When the shit hits the fan, I mean, you know, the United Nations ain't going to be there. You know, when the shit hits the fan, this United States government ain't going to be there. And we've seen that with Hurricane Katrina and Rita. You know, it took FEMA, the Federal Emergency Agency, 5 days to get water, just water, to the Superdome in New Orleans. Okay, it took them 5 days. And this is the most powerful military government on the planet. Okay, and so I think that it's important to continue to do these interventions within the UN framework, Convention on Climate Change, and other UN instruments, as well as, you know, within your local state governments. But at the same time, these interventions have got to be attached to tangible, on-the-ground best practices of what we're doing locally to oppose the fossil fuel regime and to try and work towards, you know, implementing the solutions that actually make sense for our people, wherever your people may live. And because, like I said, you know, when the shit hits the fan, you know, all these leaders that are in the UN or wherever, you know, they're not going to be the ones coming to save your family. It'll be you. And so, you know, I think in that context, our organization, the Indigenous Environmental Network, you know, always kind of walks an interesting path between, you know, those of our communities, our leaders that are on the front line fighting against the fossil fuel regime, and relaying the directives that they have all the way up to the United Nations, and bringing back, you know, to our communities what we have heard and what we have learned, so that we can be accountable, truly accountable, in the path that we walk, in the way that we participate in the movement for climate justice.